everyone. Welcome to the Lori and Tall Paul Show. I'm Lori Heinzelman, career and leadership coach with a passion for people, and I am joined by my guest host, Tall Paul Olson. On
Hello,
today's,
everyone.
yes, hello. On today's show, we'll be talking about strategies for moving forward with change, whether it's at work or in life. So, in the
All right,
last
so
episode, if you remember, we talked about embracing change and sort of taking that first step, right? Even if you didn't quite know what that looked like. So, what are your thoughts just thinking about that off the bat?
yeah, so um, what hits me is, and we don't have to get into the details here, but as you know, at work, right now I'm going through changes, and nobody likes change. It's really frustrating. It's a shock to the system, right? Um, but I think, and Lori, you're going to probably have, I'm sure, frameworks and all this for dealing with change. I don't have that stuff. All I could say is, um, when you're dealing with change, I think you have to do the best you can to have an open mind. And it's best to assume that the change is going to work out. Um, that doesn't mean there's not going to be rough patches, doesn't mean that it won't be difficult. Um, but I think it's best to assume the best intentions of other people, assume that you're going to find your way through it and that it's going to work out. That seems to me to be a healthier, better approach than kind of like the doomsday, this will never work, this is destroying my life kind of a thought process. But that's just like total layman's approach to it. Lori, do you have like any particular frameworks or anything? I mean, how do you work through change, and how do you help clients work through change?
Ooh, so I do have frameworks, but I love what you said about mindset, right? One, assuming positive intent. And I know that's tough, right? Especially if the change that came about is something you don't disagree with or you don't agree with. Maybe you weren't involved in the change and all, and that can be extremely frustrating. That's frustrating for most people, right? When you're not involved in the change, but something I have learned during the course of my career, and then as I was involved in coaching teams and then individual people, is it really is your mindset. If you can shift your mindset to, okay, I'm going to be open to the possibilities. I'm going to try to look at it for what do I gain, right? And that's a big one there. What can I gain from this opportunity, from this change? And quite honestly, what you gain, Paul, like let's use your scenario, like not specifically, right? But there's a change at work. It could be what you gain is that I will never roll out a change in this way. If I am responsible for leading change, I will make sure it's communicated differently, right? I will involve the people. And so that's when I first really started to see a change in myself, when I looked at it from I gain what I won't do in those scenarios. So for your specific example would change because that's a work change, it's an organizational change. Sometimes what you take away isn't the change itself, but it's how it was rolled out and kind of things you take away as a person, how you would do it differently. Or
That's
maybe
awesome.
how you could
And
help others do it, get accustomed to the change.
yeah, and because our show is such a big part of it is leadership. What a great way to grow as a leader, by looking at it in that way. Like take the nuggets, take the lessons. What
And
is
that's what
this?
I did as a leader. I looked at how other people were rolling out change, right? Or how they were treating people during a change. And I'm serious when I say that. I vowed that I was never going to do it that way. And what really clicked with me, which is why I'm so passionate about it, is the change management process when you get a ProSci certification.
Mm,
So when you get a
okay.
ProSci certification that helps leaders successfully roll out change, it's all centered around the people and how you communicate that message
Mhm.
to the people, your willingness to actively listen to what they're saying, And then, quite possibly, and you should implement some of those suggestions, right, to make that change smoother. And so that's
Yeah.
why I'm such a fan of that methodology because it's people centric.
So, okay, so let's say you're somebody listening is in the middle of change.
Hmm.
They don't agree with the change. They're listening to us now, and they're like, okay, well, they're telling me I gotta be, assume the best of intent and all that stuff. How do they, um, even though they think, because oftentimes when we have change that we don't agree with,
Hmm.
as soon as something hits us, we're like, oh, that's not going to work. That's no good. Why are they doing this? This is terrible. So, how does somebody, after that moment, right? With emotions, there's always that moment where the something happens, and then technically we should, if we're emotionally intelligent, we should take a moment, right? Not react right away. We should take a moment to assess, think about it, get out of the emotional state of it, get a little intellectual about it, and then move on, then make our decision. So how does somebody do that part of it if they're in this situation we're talking about? They're right in the middle of a change that they disagree with.
First of all, you just said very first step, right? Take a moment, let all the emotions, complain to everybody, do whatever you're going to do, get frustrated, right? Do everything. And then take that moment to really step away from it, right? And I'm not, and whatever the reason is, and look at what the change is and try to understand the why behind it. And if you don't understand the why, ask. Try to talk to someone who's close to the change to find out why. And listen, as much as you may disagree, listen to their viewpoint on why the change is happening. A lot of times I find if you're willing to listen to the other person, then they'll be willing to listen to you. So take the time to really understand why the decision was made, where it's coming from. It could be there's something else you're not seeing, right? There could be something else, particularly in leadership, somewhere else, something is happening that is driving that we're not aware of. And once you understand that, it might be easier to receive the change, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. That's the first thing I suggest. Another thing that I often suggest to people, and this is crazy and it's going to sound crazy, is when you don't agree with the change, you partner with the person who is leading the change or the committee who is leading the change. And
Okay.
oftentimes, when you partner with them, they see you as someone who's on their side, even if you don't necessarily agree. And I even advocate for saying that, right? I don't agree necessarily with this. I thought what we had in place was fantastic, whatever, right? But I'm willing to support and I want to partner with you. And when you partner with those people, like I said, usually they'll see that you're on their side and they're more open to listening to ideas from people who they see are on their side than from people who are against them. And so the reason I suggest partnering is once they're open to those ideas, you may actually be able to influence the change in a way that you feel might be better for the organization, the circumstance, or the other people, right? Based on feedback, which you know as someone who might be closer to the change itself.
That's awesome. I've never heard that partner with the person who's implementing the change. That is pretty radical. When it first hits me, I'm like, that's how do you do that? Like, how would I do that? But the other thing that hits me about it is when you said understand the why, right? There's
Yep.
a really powerful question that a lot of people never ask. They never think to ask. Well, technically, it's not a question. It's a statement to get some more information, and it's so powerful. There's two that are super powerful, but the one that's really powerful is help me understand that from your perspective. right? So,
Yes.
like you
Yes.
said, like don't you shouldn't really be afraid to say you disagree. And so, to give the audience some verbiage, this can look something like, okay, wow, that's okay. So we're making that change. That's surprising to me. I have to say, I wasn't really expecting that. Um, Not sure how I feel about that, but help me understand this from your perspective. Why is this necessary? Why did you choose this? Right. And especially if you can ask that in a way that it doesn't sound confrontational, but it just sounds curious. Um, you've got a powerful technique there to get more information to maybe help you be less resistant to the change.
Yep, you well said. You hit it on the the head. I can't add anything to it. And I always encourage people who are struggling through something, whether it's a change or not understanding why somebody did something right or upset with someone at work, right? Those are three separate scenarios. But having a conversation to understand the why is so important.
Mm-hmm. There's um, there's a great book called Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. Have you heard of it?
No.
Man, I read this book, and when I got to the crux of it just blew me away. It really struck a nerve. But essentially, in the book, he gives a technique for um, being able to understand how to get someone to properly communicate a real feeling, a need, and a request. And even if they don't communicate those things, what he teaches you helps you to listen for clues to where you can draw those things out of people. And so the way that this connects is most people are they're not really expressing any real feeling or need. And what they ultimately end up saying without even meaning it is that ultimately they really end up accusing us of things. And they don't know they're accusing us of things. But oddly, we pick it up as an accusation. And so the way this works here is when somebody says something about a change and you ask them to clarify, you ask them that question, help me understand this, and they express it to you. If they don't express it clearly, you're going to really miss the message. So having some kind of tools for actually hearing what people are trying to say. I think I'm rambling here, but having some kind of tool to hear what they're actually trying to say is really helpful. Let me give you an example. If you have an interaction with somebody and they go, "Wow, it's," whew, you say something and they go, "Well, that's insulting." Did they really express a feeling to you? Like if we want to get all leadership about it, and you went to a feeling wheel, right, and you looked at the feeling wheel, insulting is not on the wheel. So they didn't express what they're feeling. They express the accusation of what they think you're doing to them. They think you're insulting them,
Hmm.
right? And so, but what you can do with that knowledge is say, okay, Lori thinks I insulted her by the way she reacted. I gotta rephrase this. Okay, so I think what I was ultimately getting at there is a really roundabout way, and we can go deeper into that in a different episode. But I think ultimately what I was getting at is if somebody has a change that you disagree with, number one, you got to be aware of making sure you're expressing a real feeling and that you're not expressing yourself in a way that's just an insult to them or an accusation of what you think they're doing. And then as they explain themselves, try to listen to those things that are real needs that they're expressing, because there's a change because there's a need somewhere, and that person might not be great at communicating that need. But if you can learn active listening skills and you can become good at kind of drawing needs out of people, like understanding, oh, that's not really a need they're expressing, let me ask more questions, You become better
Yes.
at questioning. You become better at getting the actual story out of somebody.
So this also brings me to asking open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
As a coach, I have been trained to ask open-ended questions. And towards the end of my corporate career, I really learned the value of asking open-ended questions because when you ask closed-ended questions, you just get a yes or no, right? There's no option. People can't really give you the detailed something. So if
Mm-hmm.
I say, Paul, do you think this looks good? You say yes or no, right? But if I show you something and I say, what are your thoughts on this?
Mm-hmm.
You give me more information. And so, as someone who really wants to understand the why behind something, be prepared to ask open-ended questions. Things like who, what, where, why, all those things we hear about, right? The five whys, how, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're not getting the information that you want to hear, well, not even want to hear, but if you're not getting the why behind it, make sure you're asking open-ended questions that are really drawing some level of detail out. And I would say, secondly, don't be afraid to say you don't understand, right? The why behind it might be communicated to you and it's not clear to you. Don't be afraid to say I still don't understand or I still don't understand why this change is happening. Because most people will
Yeah.
stop there if they still don't understand it, but don't be afraid to keep pushing to make sure it's clear to you.
Yeah. You got to understand that they think they're being clear, right? They think they're being very clear in their answer. And if you don't really know exactly what they're saying, yeah, then it's help me understand that. I'm still not getting. I'm okay. I kind of get this. Is it this? Is it this?
Yes, and that
Like
goes
I
into
think
our
I get
whole
it.
podcast where we're going to talk about miscommunication, right? And
Yeah.
people thinking they're communicating it and they're not,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a whole other thing. But I wanted to touch on what you said about the tools and people feeling insulted or it's not really a feeling. Because on the other end, many times change is not received well by people. And
Mm-hmm.
again, it depends on the situation, is the people who feel like they should have been involved
Mm-hmm.
are insulted.
Mm-hmm.
They're insulted that they weren't asked, right, or consulted for how should we move forward, right? What do you think about this? Maybe you're the owner of something and somebody just comes in and says, nope, we're going to take it away. And you had no say in that. That feels insulting, right?
Uh-huh. So
What's
okay, so you
next?
get so give me your technique for that.
Wow, that's a total that's so funny. That's a totally it depends on whether it's individual or organizational. Um, well, we have to create the desire. We have to create something that will motivate you whether you like it or not, right? If you don't, whether you like it or not. And this is where I say the partner. This is where I suggested the partner with someone. Okay. And the reason I say this is because I have used it for many scenarios, not just change, but difficult situations, right? And so change in essence is difficult, particularly if we don't like the change, right? Like this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like it at all. But I have used it to partner to um, work better with people I don't like at work, right? Whether it's because I just don't like their personality, or maybe I perceive that their performance is different than mine, right? Maybe it's less, maybe I feel like it's less quality, right? Or it's somebody who's taking control and taking credit for everything. But I have used it in situations where I don't like the change, right? But when I partnered with the person, again, my I was able to influence to where I could make the change something that was favorable for me. So I would say, even if you don't like it, I'm going back to the partner with the person, with the team, right? And say, okay, I disagree with this. I'm not happy. I don't like it, but what can we do? And now, in that scenario that you gave, people say, well, how can I partner with someone who just took away a project from me, right? How can I do that? You can't. But what you can say is, I'm not happy with the decision, right? Let's say they gave it to Lori because Lori does a better job. That's what they told you. Wow, right? You're unhappy. Again, there's going to be that emotional reaction. So I always recommend take a moment, Have the reaction. You need to have the reaction. Just don't do it in public. Have the reaction, get it out of your system, look at the scenario objectively, and then go back and say, okay, I did not like that you took the project away from me because you thought Lori could do a better job. What can I do to work on a similar project again? Or what can I do to gain more responsibility? Or how might I get that project back? Right? What are some things that I can do to get back in, on that side?
Or what does Lori do better than me? I would like to, from your perspective, what does Lori do better than me with projects like this?
You could ask that, and I would hope that the person responded, Lori, that it's not what Lori does better, right? It's these are areas where you can improve, right? Here are some areas where you can improve, and then you would be able to take on projects like the one that I passed off to Lori, right? And you need to strengthen in those areas. And then when they tell you where you need to get stronger, that's when you take the opportunity, you set your ego aside and you say, okay, how can you help me get there? How can you help me get better in that area? How can you help me with my time management skills?
I mean, that's so much more powerful than I'm pissed. I'm going to yell at my boss. I'm going to, throw things off of the desk, yada, yada. Like people, a boss who sees that kind of reaction, I think, would gain a lot of respect for someone.
I think so. And it all goes back to mindset, like we talked about, and I talk so much about that. And I know we're focused on strategies for moving forward with change, but really your mindset is huge. If you go into every change with a fixed mindset that there's nothing to take away from it and everybody's wrong and you're right, you're never going to gain anything from a change, right?
Yeah.
But if you
Yeah.
go into it with an open mind, with seeing it as an opportunity for you to grow, right? Not getting offended or insulted and looking at it, wow, I have this opportunity to get better. And this person thinks that I can, and I'm going to go to them for the tools, right? Or if it's a change, again, a larger change that affects the entire organization, how can I partner with them to help roll it out? Maybe I can help my coworkers understand it a little bit better so I can ease the change for others, right? But then again, when you partner, you have that opportunity to maybe influence as well to where they will listen to you and you can sort of be that voice for the people,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And that's what I've learned. And it works, right? I advocate for it so strongly because I am like a long time, Lori's right, I'm fixed mindset. This, I don't need to grow, blah, blah, blah. And then like 8 years, 9 years ago, maybe, um, my mentor totally blew that out of the water. And I have had a growth mindset ever since. And my life has just changed. So, how you embrace change absolutely impacts how successful it is and how you receive it.